Mr. Chairman. House Bill 581 is a constitutional amendment that is aimed at creating a floating statewide homestead exemption that limits increases in taxable home values to the prior year's inflation rate. Currently, Lowndes County is not considering eliminating the current homestead exemption. The ballot language, the statute, the way it's written, what was approved by the voters, recognize the need to consider an opt-out option, being that not every local government is created the same as far as revenues go. The General Assembly has recognized those challenges in the bill by introducing new legislation this session that addresses opting in and out, as well as the parcel size that is not addressed and other things. The current 581, the way it's written, could challenge uniformity by locking in homestead values in a digest that are not accurate. There's a significant erosion of home rule by placing the pivot point of millage considerations in the hands of an unelected state commissioner that is going to consider a federal inflationary index that could change. Lowndes County is sensitive to the impact that taxes have on citizens. Currently, we are operating at 2018 general fund expenditure levels, even with the significant inflation that we've experienced over the last several years. For Lowndes County, staying in 581 could cause a considerable shift in funding that would result in a millage increase to all other parcels. The Lowndes County Board of Commissioners has significantly rolled the millage rate back over the last few years. That doesn't have a meaningful impact on tax bills when not all local governments and school systems roll back. I think you all have experienced that frustration, especially with the significant rollback we had this last year, but tax bills still went up when everyone does not roll back. There's a challenge there where the school systems are concerned that is also currently being addressed by the General Assembly this session, but we won't know what the result of that is until after the session is over. Lowndes County, along with the school systems, is aggressively pursuing an additional senior exemption for those 65 and over. So that is a consideration in lieu of 581 that we are aggressively working on. I spoke with Sandra Wilcher while we were in Atlanta last week. She and I have a meeting this week to prepare some proposals to bring to you the impact that those would have in the digest. Not only are we looking at options for 65 and over, but a secondary exemption for those 70 and older, and we will show you in those numbers how that would impact, how that can impact the digest there. I think overall, though, the conversations that we've had while we were in Atlanta, some of the conversations we've had with citizens and you all, is that it's very difficult to implement a one-size-fits-all when, again, not all local governments are created equally as far as their revenue streams go. I think that here in Lowndes County, along with the concern that seniors could be taxed out of their homes eventually, the conversation is around affordable housing. And when you look at 581 creating a shift to all parcels that are not homestead exempt, that they would increase there, then that's going to push rent rates and other options related to affordable housing in a direction that we're trying to overcome. We have a presentation that's been prepared by our finance department, so if there are no questions, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Black for that presentation.
Any questions? Done? All right, Ms. Black.
Thank you. Just some information regarding House Bill 581. This limits the annual increase in the taxable value by a rate of inflation, again to be determined by the State Revenue Commissioner. The initial base year for existing homesteads will be 2024. The base year for future homesteads will be what the fair market value is at the time that they apply for that. Sales of homes resets the base to the fair market value at the time of sale. There is one option to opt out of this, and it has to be done by March the 1st. So if a local government or a school has not opted out by March 1st, they can never get out. If you do opt out, you have the option to opt back in the future. There are some consequences, both pros and cons of the opting out or opting in the homestead exemption. So there's an inherent gap between the actual fair market value and the capped value, which will increase over time. As that increases, the amount of revenue that long-term ownership versus newer ownership. Someone who owned a property prior to 2024 would be capped beginning with that base year of 2024, but a similar property that was purchased 10 years later would be at the current fair market value. Because of that benefit, that may disincentivize the sale of homestead properties. So upgrading homes or even downsizing may be disincentivized. It can also affect relocation of businesses to the county because of increased taxes. Now, there's no way to actually project what is going to happen to millage and to the amount of the digest, but for illustrative purposes, with all things being the same, this is going to show the impacts of that. What you see on the first graph, the darker line is what the average growth in fair market values is over time. And the gray or the lighter gray line is the capped value and how that is increasing based on what a projection of the Revenue Commissioner's index is going to be. And what you see is, again, that gap gets bigger and bigger over time. The same thing would happen with the millage rate. The amount the millage rate would have to be increased to make up that difference would increase over time. Again, if you look at the benefit to the homesteads, the amount of the benefit is smaller in the beginning and grows over time. So the longer that you own that property, the bigger benefit you would get. But again, once that property is sold or you purchase a new home, that starts all over again. There is a timeline and some requirements to opt out. In January, you had to vote and post a notice of intent to opt out and provide a press release and post the information on the website. And during the month of February, you have to hold at least 3 public hearings in accordance with the requirements for times and advertising. You have to vote on a resolution to opt out, and you must file that resolution with the Secretary of State prior to March 1st. That's the reason we went ahead and posted the intent to opt out, because of the timeline. Again, some additional points. Both local school systems have published their intent to opt out. House Bill 581 also introduced a FLOST, which is a floating local option sales tax. That's an additional sales tax of up to 1% to help offset the exemption. But that requires all cities and the county to opt in. You would have to have an agreement between the city of Valdosta and Lowndes County on how to split that, which would have to be renegotiated. And you would have a referendum, which would have to be renewed in 5 years. The capped values also impact negatively the authority funding as well as funding for fire services, because those digest amounts would be smaller. If you look at the millage history, the darker bar is the amount that comes directly to Lowndes County. There are 2 increases in that in 2014 and 2016, but every year other than that, the millage has either stayed the same or been reduced, and the millage is significantly lower than it was in 2005. Again, as Ms. Dukes mentioned, there is a consideration of additional senior citizen exemptions. The Lowndes County School Board and Board of Commissioners have been working together on a new exemption. Currently, the exemption for seniors in Lowndes County is $10,000, which is more than is what is provided $200,000 home, again, the current senior exemption is $10,000. So based on the county millage rate, the county portion of tax is approximately $370. For each additional $10,000 that was added to that senior exemption on a $200,000 house, that would save roughly $50 per $10,000. The amount for the school board would be almost 3 times that. Their millage rate is almost 3 times what the county millage is. This is a complicated issue. There are a lot of inherent issues written into the statute, but there is one small window to opt out or you're locked in forever. Opting in creates inequities that cannot be corrected. Opting in does provide benefits to the homestead property owners that become more meaningful the longer they own the property. But opting out allows for local control, giving the county the ability to make impactful changes now and in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good presentation. Thank you, Ms. White. Appreciate